Today's video is going to be about a Fisher 600 and also how this receiver can be used as basically a buyer's guide for other receivers that are from the same era, mostly tube receivers that this kind of information would apply to. But first, I don't know if you've noticed, if you like vintage audio and you go on YouTube, the results you get are pretty abysmal. So being that YouTube is now the second most used search engine, let's change that. So I'd appreciate if you like this kind of content, a thumbs up and a subscription so that you can see when I post more. It seems that most of the videos here are from flippers who are giving other flippers an idea of what to buy in order to make the most money. That's not what I'm about. I collect this stuff and I like it a lot, and I also know a good amount about it. There's a lot of misinformation out here and a lot of people that frankly make the videos about themselves or their weird fetishes more than about the items themselves. I don't like to really go and do a bunch of selfie mode portraits and talk about stuff with my face in them. Yeah, I'd like to just show you and hopefully educate people and actually learn a thing or two in the process of making these videos. So if you like this kind of thing, I'd appreciate your like and subscribe to my channel, and that allows more people to see my content. I don't make any money off of this. I don't intend to make any money off this. I just want people to get the right information so that they can better enjoy a hobby that is aging quite rapidly and won't have anybody to fill in the people that we lose in these forums every year if we don't get more younger people interested. So this is a beautiful Fisher 600. I might be a bit repetitive in the next video since I made it before I made this one, but I did want to just kind of say that, and I appreciate your time. And now let's get to business. Okay, I want to do a quick video that I think will serve as hopefully a buyer's guide for people that are interested in old tube receivers. This unit is a very good example, so this is kind of what you'd be looking for, but I will also tell you about things you should watch out for. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but who knows, the video still might end up being 15 minutes long. I'll try my best to keep it brief though. So let's get right into it. This is a Fisher 600. This is Fisher's first stereo receiver. So it's an all tube unit. It's got 20 something tubes and very, very well built. The only thing plastic on this, as I saw in an article somewhere else, is the knobs. Everything else and switches. Everything else is pretty much metal. So when you look at these, you want to go ahead and start with your faceplate, obviously. Because that's the first thing you'll probably see. This unit has about as good as you're going to get for the age. So you'll see some little spots here and there where there's oxidation. These are solid brass faceplates that were lacquered from the factory, and the lacquer's old. So there's a lot of these, and when they're not stored correctly, or if they end up in a garage where the brass is completely tarnished because the lacquer has essentially failed. And you're limited in what you can do because unlike the earlier mono units that Fisher made, the lettering is not engraved on these. So they made the faceplate, they printed the lettering on, and then I think they lacquered over the top of that. So you want to be careful. You want to look for a unit that has a nice faceplate because you're going to be limited in terms of what you can do going forward to restore that. In addition, if you're going to buy one of these, don't keep it in your garage. Make sure you keep it inside where it's warm and hopefully dry, or else the oxidation is going to really kick into overdrive. So this is, like I said, a really nice unit, really high quality, about 20 watts per channel, but it uses 7189 tubes, which are really great sounding and not super expensive to replace. Another thing you'll want to look out for is your face plate or your tuning dial here. They're printed on the back so you can wash the front. However, you don't want to wash the back of these, or if you do, make sure your lettering is attached, because if these are not stored properly, this lettering can begin to deteriorate. This unit is, Fisher was a little better than Marantz, for example, about this, but this lettering is still very fragile and you want to be careful with it. And then also check for cracks and stuff, obviously, because if this isn't shipped properly, that faceplate can crack, and then you kind of have to wait for a parts unit to come for sale. And these switches are plastic, as mentioned before. These ones are in excellent shape, but these knobs can end up cracking quite easily, especially if the person who shipped it to you didn't remove them. And if they crack, then you're kind of toast, because they kind of just shatter. They don't really crack cleanly. This early plastic is not very forgiving. Check all your switches, of course. Typically these are fine, but if you have some that are just really loosey-goosey, you're going to want to go and tighten those up and make sure that they make good contact. That'll probably be a separate video though. Okay, so next thing is, if it's in a cabinet, you want to go ahead and pull it out of the cabinet. And if you're looking at this like a Craigslist kind of deal and you're in person, then yeah, pull it out of the cabinet, take a look, see what kind of tubes you've got. You want to see the original Fisher tubes, and they were all marked Fisher. So here's one. The labeling is worn off, but I can see the New York. Fisher, the ER in Fisher is visible there. That's a Telefunken. That's a Telefunken, that's a Telefunken. So when you see a lot of original tubes, it's a good thing, because if those Telefunkens test good, that's a $50 tube at least. And there's 3 of them, so $150 right there in tubes. But don't pull them out, don't be that guy. When I see these units and the Fishers, the original tubes have been pulled out and replaced with Russian tubes, I'm out. I'm not going to buy it, no matter what the price is. And so look for those. Look at your 12AX7. See that they're not some weird off-brand thing from the time period, or make sure they're not Russian tubes. They probably sound fine, but that's part of the value of these units is the tubes. You'll want to do the same for the 5AR4. If somebody has swapped out the 5AR4 for a JJ, for example, don't bother with that person, because all they're doing is stripping the unit to make the most money they can, and it's not going to be a great value for you if that's the case, especially when those JJ rectifiers are known for their terrible quality control. And then same story for the 7189s. These you'll probably find have been replaced, because these really run hot, and it's just kind of inevitable that if somebody used a unit even like lightly over 20 years, they're probably going to have to replace a set of tubes. If they're all original, they all say Fisher on them. I have 2 originals here. Let me see if I can set these up without knocking them over. Yeah, so this pair here is the originals that came with it. Probably not super strong, but there's definitely a value add to having the originals in there. And the other 2 here are RCAs, so it's not really important that you have a quad matched pair in these, since you can adjust the bias per pair. So if you just have 2 sets of pairs, then you're going to be good. So you want to look at the chassis, just look at your tubes, look at your chassis. That's spot oxidation, but really, really minor. This is about as clean as you're going to get for one of these, unless it was kept in a console, sealed up, and never taken out, and never in a damp environment, never in a place where it wasn't climate controlled. then I guess theoretically you could get something cleaner than this, but this is about as good as you're gonna get. All the lettering's there. There's just that one or a couple spots where there is some oxidation. Just leave it alone. Don't go scrubbing on this, don't do anything to it, because the whole chassis is coated, and what will happen is you go and clean that up, you're just gonna make an even more noticeable spot, like there. There's another spot where it'll be obvious you tried to clean it and scrub it. Just leave it alone. It's to be expected, and it doesn't hurt the value, in my opinion. Now, the only issue I really saw with this one is this: it's not really an issue in terms of functionality, it's just ugly, and that's this freaking power transformer. So this is the lumpiest Fisher power transformer I've ever seen. I don't know if our guy here that wound this baby was hungover. I'm not sure, but it's very lumpy. What you want to look for, though, is if there's any gaps in the laminations, and there are not. So functionally, this guy's going to be fine. This one little spot here is not going to hurt anything. But if it's gapped apart and you can see down into it, that is going to affect how the transformer functions. And then you want to check your tuner. You want to see, because what can happen is, especially if one of these is in kind of some kind of rough shipping situation, this faceplate and these side parts here are the first to get bent, and then what you end up with is a lumpy, uneven tuning wheel. As you can see, this one is true. This one is also true. Now you can see that's a very, very thick shaft. On the later units, they were not overbuilt to this quality. So this unit, I mean, you could probably drive a washing machine with that spindle. And then these little pulleys are metal as well. In later units, they become plastic, and then they're more affected by things like shipping damage. On one of these, if it got bent, you just bend it back out, but on the plastic ones, you clearly have to be more careful. So I think that's good on the top of this unit. Here, we'll take a look at the power cord. This is the original. Fisher was, whatever rubber they used for these power cords is the stuff. These rarely need to be replaced. Don't go out and replace it just to replace it. There's no sonic benefit, and you're hurting the value by doing so. So leave the power cord alone unless you find cracks, and even then, it'd probably be better just to cut back the section where there's wear and then put a new plug on there, since you're not going to be able to get this guy off. So with that, I'll flip it over, and then I'll go through parts that are going to need to be replaced on these old receivers and on this unit in particular. Okay, we've got the unit flipped over now, and we'll take a look here quickly at parts that should be replaced. And I'd start with every single one of these ceramic resistors, especially these. So as you can see, the chassis is discolored because these babies get real warm, and I guarantee you they've all drifted. It's a 7-watt resistor, 7 watt, 7 watt, so that, you know, there's a lot of power dissipation going, which means a lot of heat. And not only are you going to have to replace these, but you're also going to have to replace the wiring that was wedged. So that looks like it's cloth. On the black wire is cloth, so that one's good. But over here, you can see the wiring is charred. So typically what I do is I just cut the wire back a tiny bit, so just to the end of the rubber, and then once you strip it back, you'll have nice fresh insulation that'll protect the wiring. This wire here, this red one, you might have to go back a little further. And if the wire, you know, is totally hard and, you know, all the way back, you're gonna have to just pull it out and replace it. I'd recommend, if you're gonna do your own service and you're qualified and you understand the risks, disclaimer, then, you know, you should have a parts unit. So go buy one of these tuners, some old tuner with period correct, and you'll have all the wiring you could ever need to repair units. Don't be the guy that puts lamp cord in one of these old receivers. Just do it right. So I see too much lamp cord and other crap inside of these receivers by repair technicians, quote unquote. that couldn't be bothered to do the job right. So in addition to those, I digress. In addition to those resistors, these coupling caps probably should be replaced. You can get these for like $1 each that are like better quality and a similar size and will look right at home in here. And you can replace those in a matter of minutes and not have to worry about these failing. Because if they do fail, you're going to have problems, and you don't want those kind of problems. These are capacitors here that will need to be replaced on both sides. As you can kind of see, we're getting kind of a mirrored thing going where we've got both channels. These resistors need to go as well. They've likely drifted, and these are high voltage, so you want to make sure you've got some good ones here. And going back, you'll replace this CAN capacitor that's on the other side here, and while you're at it, you'll replace these 2 resistors. Take pictures of this if you're going to be in here. Take pictures of it before, because if you get in here and you take these off and you put it back in, you're going to forget they were there, because there'll be no other evidence that they existed other than the old capacitor. This is another CAN that'll need to be replaced, and there's another one somewhere around here. But anyway, all those CANs, if you're really going to use this unit, regularly replace the caps. It's just not worth it. This cap here, this one needs to go. Now it's got a paper wrapping on it, so if you do replace it, you're going to want to keep this and then put it over. You can make essentially the new cap look completely original by sliding this back over, since the dimensions haven't changed. So CE Manufacturing makes a replacement here. You could use a 4040-2020, and Authenticap, the German capacitors, they make one that is, I think, identical in terms of size here, and higher quality in my opinion, but also expensive. So you could either insulate it. I don't know how the insulation works or why this is paper wrapped. I'm not like an electrical engineer. I'm just really particular. So, but I just slide this back over the top, and if it fits, and then you'd have it'd be original, but it would work, and you wouldn't have to worry about it melting down. Because I think this one has given this kind of milky residue. Who knows? Could have been something that was sprayed in there at some point. And then this guy needs to go as well. So at this point you've gone ahead and you've replaced a good number of the parts in the amplifier section. Oh yeah, this guy needs to go as well. But you kind of have to decide how far you want to go with this, because are you going to use AM? Are you going to use FM? If not, there's a whole host of parts you won't need to replace. But then there's the preamp section, which is important, and you'll also need to replace parts there as well. So you got to look and just kind of study the schematic. I'm not sure if the 600 schematic's readily available, but I'm sure it's somewhere out there and you can get it. That's what you'll want to work out of. So once you've gone through, you'll want to check your values on the existing resistors that you didn't already replace, because they're probably going to be drifted, or a good number of them will probably be borderline where you could replace them or leave them. And you want to do that. I mean, you don't have to do every single resistor, especially if it's in an area that you're just not going to be utilizing, but in areas that like the amp section, preamp section, you want to check them. So then when you've done all that, I think the last step would probably be to go ahead and clean every single switch and pot, and use the Deoxit F5, and it should be enough. But what I'm noticing on these old Fisher units is these switches are oxidized to the point that signal is not getting through, and Deoxit is not enough at this point. You actually have to physically clean them. Thankfully, because they're riveted in for the most part, it's difficult, but thankfully there's the guts that you actually need to access can be, the clips can be bent out carefully, and then you can pull the guts out, clean the switch, put it all back together, and nobody will ever know the difference other than the switch will be clean and your unit will function correctly. So if you've gone through and replaced all these parts, you get it back together, and for whatever reason you have a channel dropping in and out, it's likely due to one of these switches. The pots are probably okay, it's probably a switch. And before you just bias or anything, you're gonna make sure you're gonna want to clean that pot. That's important. And on some of these units, especially the ones that have copper chassis, you're gonna have an issue of like dissimilar metals where ground points are no longer ground points because there's a resistance built up because of the oxidation. This unit I don't think is going to have that issue since it's all aluminum. So, or is this a steel chassis? It's aluminum. So I think you're fine. But on something like the SA100, which I just got done restoring and have a video on, that was a problem, and I had to solder from the terminal strips down to the chassis and make a new ground. So I think that does it. I have quite a few of these videos in the works, quite a few units I'm going through and fixing during this pandemic. We're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, so I want to get as much stuff done as I can before I've got to return to the office. And so here I am working on this stuff and having a great old time, spending a lot of money in parts. Mouser really likes me, so does DigiKey. So that's a benefit to the economy and a detriment to my wallet, but that's okay. It's fun. It's a good way to pass the time, and I still have my mental health, so for the most part. So if you like this kind of video, if you like well-made things, even if you're not super interested in stereo equipment, I also review more of like household appliances, electronics, things that you find around a typical house, but are not of the disposable variety. So check out those videos, and if you like this kind of thing, subscribe and leave a thumbs up, since that helps me get out to more people. I don't make any money off this channel. I don't really need to make any money off this channel, but when you make a video and you put effort into it, it's nice to have people actually watch it. So I appreciate your time, and thanks again.